Hey guys, inside number 4. So we're in chapters 21 through 24 of Mosiah. Now we just talked about the whole incident with the Lamanite daughters that Limhi's people didn't do, but the Lamanites thought they did. And then there's verse 15 of chapter 20. They have a good chat about it and go, oh, that wasn't you. Oh, remember those priests that ran off? Probably them. Okay. So they sort that out. But in 21 we continue to read that they're in bondage, defeated by the Lamanites. And while they have this oath where they won't come on them and try and kill them, they don't treat them very well either. And we read that in verse 3. It says, they durst not slay them because of the oath which their king had made unto Limhi, but they would smite them on their cheeks and exercise authority over them, and began to put heavy burdens upon their backs and drive them as they would a dumb ass. So, treat them really badly like animals. It says the afflictions of the Nephites are great, and there was no way that they could deliver themselves out of the hands, for the Lamanites had surrounded them on every side. Now, we can often feel like this. I'm going to go very metaphorical again instead of literal. We might not literally be surrounded on every side by an enemy, but we can metaphorically be very trapped by an enemy or an abusive relationship, an addiction, many different things. And it can treat us very badly, and the weight on us can be incredible. So that's probably more what we're going to find these days, rather than an actual surrounding of enemy, although I do have friends that have lived in places where that happens too. But more so, we are going to find it to be a metaphorical type way that we can learn from this. So they go against them a couple of times, and there's a lot of widows because there's a lot of them that get killed. And in 13 it says, they did humble themselves even to the dust, subjecting themselves to the yoke of bondage, submitting themselves to be smitten and to be driven to and fro and burdened according to the desires of their enemies. There was nothing they could do. They tried in anger, frustration. But the way out of the battle is relying on trusting in God to deliver. So 14, they did humble themselves even in the depths of humility and cry mightily to God, even all the day long that they could cry unto their God that he would deliver them out of their afflictions. So they were praying hard out. And it began to soften the hearts of the Lamanites. You continue to read in verse 15 there. But the Lord still didn't, and they began to ease the burdens, but the Lord still didn't take them out of that bondage. Now, I've been in a situation like this where, again, not a whole group of enemy Lamanites, but just a very abusive situation. And there wasn't the right time to leave it. The Lord did not deliver me out of that bondage immediately. He waited until the time was right, whether I agreed with that or not. And I still struggle with, you could have done it sooner. And perhaps, but it's not just about me in that situation, and it's not just about this people. Now, this people needed to learn to have that relationship with Christ, and maybe I did too. I don't know that that was the way I wanted it to happen, but I don't know. So sometimes I can still get a bit mad about it, and I'm sure Limhi's people did that too. But I always, at the end of the day, committed back to Christ and prayed and cried, please release me from this bondage. So the deliverance may not always come immediately as we would like it to, for whatever reason. But here's the best thing. He shows up in that bondage and does it with us. So he lightens that load. And it goes on to say that they were able to do that they suffered a lot. And yet they were actually able to do that. So the first step in all of this is just turn on the light and ask for help, Just ask Christ for that help. So that's a little bit there of it. We go on in 22, they're able to get out. They get the Lamanites drunk, basically, and just walk away, which is pretty cool. And then we go back to 23 and 24 about Alma and the way they were able to get out, and they got out is similar. But Alma was teaching them the same kind of things. Now, remember, Limhi's people didn't have an organised church, but as soon as they get up back to, we see at the end of 24, so they all get up together. Amulon persecutes Alma, and they all return to Zarahemla, and then they join the church, and they're all happy. And so that's all in there from 21 through 24. But it shows the two stories of them escaping that bondage. So one of them just literally got them drunk and walked away. Alma refuses to be king, and then they get overrun, and he basically is able to, this is in 24, Amulon persecutes them. And they raise their voices and get out of there, and they get their burdens eased too. because of the bondage and the covenant that they made, and that's that promise of covenant living, and we're going to talk about that in the next one. But they were able to get and pass them in the night time again because a deep sleep fell upon them. So they didn't necessarily get them drunk, just that the Lord caused a deep sleep to come upon them. So in both times they were able to just walk away, but at the right moment when the Lord provided it. So in all of this, what do we learn? So in this week's reading, we see the deliverance of Limhi and Alma's people, both around the same time frame, but they're giving them both the same stories. Alma at this point isn't aware that King Noah died, and he probably knew Limhi was his son and probably happy to see him at the end of 24 when they all joined back up together, and Alma's created this church, and Limhi's like, woohoo, you know. But they're both in different circumstances, and they both had to learn patience, and that deliverance is actually in God's time. And we can do that too. It's so incredibly difficult because we want it over and we want it done. We want this trial passed, and we don't know what we're supposed to learn, and we're like, can we just learn it already because we're done with this? But we just need to wait on God's timing. As frustrating and as hurtful and as damaging as that can be, there's always a reason, even if we cannot see it. We just got to trust it. But boy, are we blessed for it. 100,000,000% over. Jesus will turn up with us in those bondage moments and work through them with us. He will hold us up. He will keep us being able to fight like dragons. He will be able to do all those things. And then guide us through those deliverance moments, which in both cases here, you see, were actually very peaceful. Just had to wait for that right time. So in the waiting, though, we see examples of their growth, how they learn to look for good, to prosper by degrees. And have you seen this in life, in your life? Yes, I have. I've prospered by degrees. It's taken time. Frustratingly, yes. Very impatient, very stubborn person I am. But I've learned to look for the good, and I do prosper by degrees. So I can see that in these trials that happen, there's so much good in them as well. In chapter 24, we see that if we are covenanted and remain covenant living, that the bondage, that in the bondage, Christ is there with us and shares the burden, making it light for us. Is it still hard? Of course it is. However, yoked to him, we can hold hope and truly overcome. And you can see the difference there in that. So Limhi's people hadn't covenanted, and they fought several times and lost a lot of people. Alma's people were bondage, didn't fight, just knew that a way was going to be provided, and they prayed, and then weren't allowed to pray out loud, so they had to pray in their hearts, but that still worked. And I used to carry a prayer in my heart all day long. Probably not so much these days. I'm not in that same bondage state. But very much then I was. And was able to feel those burdens made light. And so many good things to offset that. And as Elder Renlund talks about, all those things. All that infuriating unfairness will be more than compensated for. And I know that to be true. I've seen a lot of it in my life now. But I know that to be true. And I know that a lot more of it's to come. And that's pretty exciting because there's a lot of infuriating unfairness for all of us, not just me, for all of us. So we make the best of what we have, knowing that actually Christ is with us in these moments. He's not just saying, go do it, you can do this, you got this. And we are yoked to him, especially through covenants. If we can keep those covenants and keep covenant-led, spirit-led, covenant strong, then we will see the easing of the heaviness. We will be blessed with those things that help us through. 100%. All right. He shows up in bondage with us. Have a read of these chapters. Have a discussion between the two different ways of living. Both got delivered, but some realized that relationship and that covenant relationship was a way better way to do it. So it's something we can take on ourselves, right? Okay, here we're going to look at a couple of verses in 23 and then some in 24 about the promise of covenant living, and finish this all off about how awesome it is to actually have covenants and to live in them, and to be blessed in this day and age with way more covenant living possibilities than they had then. All right, stay around. I'll see you there.